Time's Arrow is one of our earliest songs. It was the title track of our third album, but it was actually written well before our debut EP. It predates Nina and Jesse being in the band, and it even predates choosing the band name. It goes all the way back to the summer of 2008 when I had just met Chris, our original drummer and co-founder of the band. We knew we were going to have some kind of metal band, but we hadn't quite nailed down the style yet. The few songs that we had at the time were on the shorter side and they were more traditional metal, but we had this really long demo. It was a lot more on the power metal side, it was progressive, and we thought it was strong. The arrangement on the demo was very close to what we did in the studio years later, and the vocal melodies were even there on lead guitar. But we didn't think we were ready to record it yet. We didn't have enough experience, we weren't good enough yet, so we just sat on it. Eventually we went in and we did our debut EP and our first album, and we weren't super happy with those. Eventually we met our longtime producer, Kevin Gutierrez. We went in and we did our second album, Out of the Darkness, and we were very happy with that one. So at that point, we brought out Time's Arrow for album number 3. There were a few bands and songs that influenced the music on Time's Arrow. One of them was Welcome to the Future by Judas Priest. That's the last song on their Nostradamus album, which is not an album that a lot of Judas Priest fans like, but I loved it and I listened to it a lot around that time. And the guitar solo on that song in particular got stuck in my brain. That solo, which is in the middle of the song, becomes harmonized towards the end, and if you listen to that little harmonized section, and in particular the way it locks in with the rhythm, I think you'll be able to hear how it influenced the intro of Time's Arrow. The biggest influence by far was Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden. They're both gallops on the faster side with lots of harmonized guitars, lots of twists and turns and longer arrangements, and they're both about time travel. So this was all very intentional. At that point in my songwriting journey, I hadn't written that many songs and I didn't even really have a band yet. I was working with Chris, but we didn't have a bassist or a singer, and I didn't know if we'd ever do a recording or play out. So I was really writing this more for my own enjoyment and to challenge myself to see if I could do something like my heroes, and Iron Maiden are definitely heroes of mine. Time's Arrow has a long, slow, creepy, theatrical interlude, and that's a little bit spacey too, and the spaciness probably came from my love of Hawkwind, which is one of my favorite bands. And if you're not familiar with them, they're a space rock band, and their forte, especially in the early days, was creating music with effects and sounds that sound like they came straight from outer space. So that's definitely in the mix. And the last big influence was probably Deep Purple, but none of the sections of Time's Arrow were written to sound like Deep Purple in any way. The influence really came in that after all the music was written, I went back and I put electric organ over the whole song, just throughout, and that definitely came from Deep Purple. The lyrics are all by Chris. I gave him the title and just a very brief story prompt as a starting point, and he had the vocal rhythms and melodies from the demo to write to. I had done the vocal parts as lead guitar, so he wrote his words to fit those. The title, Time's Arrow, is the title of a short story by Arthur C. Clarke. And I wish I could tell you that that's where I got the title, but I'm not that cultured, and I actually got it from a run of Captain America comics that was coming out around that time. But I'm pretty sure that the writer on Captain America, Ed Brubaker, probably got the title from Arthur C. Clarke. The story prompt that I gave Chris was inspired by the title. I remember looking up Time's Arrow at the time and finding an explanation that time was like an arrow. Time only moves forward. It can never move backward, and so we can never get back the time we've lost. Time travel is not possible. So that inspired this idea that there was this scientist, and he had a family, but he had become obsessed with time travel, and he had locked himself away in his laboratory trying to develop this time machine, which was probably a futile task, but he was figuratively trying to create time while he was actually losing time. He was losing the time of his life, losing time with his family. So it was always supposed to be more allegorical than literal. So Chris took all of that and ran with it. He took the story in a little bit of a different direction, and he created a set of lyrics that I think works wonderfully with the music. In particular, he really paints a picture of this scientist losing his mind over this obsession. But most importantly, Chris is the one who added the emphasis on taking charge of your own destiny. And that's something that really resonated with everybody in the band, so we decided to lean into that, and we made Change Your Destiny the tagline of the whole album. Over the years, between the original concept and Chris's lyrics, this song has come to represent taking charge of our destiny and treating time like a precious resource. So that's something we've tried to internalize, and we try and keep that front of mind to motivate us and keep us moving forward no matter what. Nina and I created the cymbal together. I drew the original hand-drawn version, which did not look very good at all, but it had some of the elements of the original. It had arrows making a circle around an hourglass. But Nina, being a graphic designer, took that, and she's the one that really created the version you'd recognize now. She made it modern and sleek looking, and she added the sand moving through the hourglass. So if you look at that symbol, you might think that in the context of our sci-fi song that it just represents time travel. But if you had a time machine for real, you'd be able to go forwards or backwards in time. And so the arrows in that symbol should be going in both directions. And the secret of the symbol is that the arrows only go in one direction, the sand is only going from top to bottom. So really it echoes the themes of the song. It just represents that time is always moving forward, and you got to make the most of the time you have. So that's something that's always resonated with the band, and so much so that when our original drummer and co-founder Chris retired from the band, we all went as a group and we got that symbol tattooed on our bodies.
Fading from my tired sight, endlessly into the night, spirits from beyond the grave.
Steve Lord has been our top secret session musician who comes into the studio to play uncredited electric organ on a Sound of Thunder tracks for the last 15 years, but nobody ever sees him in real life. Nobody's ever heard of him, so I will now share the secret of Steve Lord with you. When I did the original demo for Time's Arrow, I played electric organ on the entire song for no other reason than I felt like it that day, and I really like that sound. Deep Purple is one of my favorite bands, and they're known for their organ sound. They've got John Lord, one of the best keyboard players in the world, and he's usually playing a Hammond organ. So I put organ on the demo. When we got to the studio years later, our producer Kevin decided he liked that sound. We obviously liked it, so we just committed. We're gonna put organ on this entire 9-minute song. But there was one big problem. I do not play the organ. I understand the music theory, I can play the keyboard, but an organ has all these drawbars that are essential to getting a good organ tone, and I don't know how to use those. So what we did was I played the parts on a MIDI keyboard, the data went into the computer, and Kevin did the drawbars in the computer after the fact. So we actually achieved a sound that I really like. I'm really happy with the recording, but the joke became that our talents combined were roughly equivalent to Steve Lord, the younger, less talented brother of John Lord. And that's been the joke for the last decade plus. So anytime we get in the studio, Kevin and I combine to form Steve Lord, and we put down some organ tracks for Sound of Thunder.